people just love to complain sometimes, right? But we're going to try not to complain too much for the next hour here on 97.3 ESPN. I want to react to some of the comments Howie Roseman made yesterday in Indianapolis. Plus, we're going to get into Flyers. They've won 2 straight since the return from the Four Nations break. And Kevin Durso, our 97.3 ESPN.com Flyers insider, will join us coming up in, 18 minutes from now. As always, you guys can join the conversation at 609-403-0973. Your DMs into 97.3 ESPN mobile app powered by First Bank of Seattle. Look, if you guys want to keep complaining about the Sixers, you can go for it. All right. But I think we're going to change the direction a little bit here, because the Eagles general manager, Howie Roseman, made a very interesting set of comments yesterday. And I think it's very important for us to kind of keep tabs on the birds this offseason, because this Eagles team, they are trying to make 2 different transitions simultaneously. The one transition is they're trying to move from contender to defending champion. That's one transition, okay? So you're shifting your mindset. You're going from the hunter to the hunted. The second transition you're trying to make is from one coaching staff to another. And as I wrote about in 97.3 ESPN.com earlier today, also, if you have the 97.3 ESPN mobile app, you would have gotten the alert already, which is the Eagles are looking outside of the traditional avenues for their next quarterback coach. Their next quarterback coach, they've interviewed. Now, remember, the quarterback coach was Doug Nussmeier, right? Well, he was brought with Kellen Moore to New Orleans. Right now, Philadelphia is looking for their 4th different quarterback coach in the last 4 years. And they've interviewed a longtime New Jersey coach to be their next QB coach. You can get more into that at 973ESPN.com. But Howie Roseman made this comment yesterday. He was on NBC Sports Pro Football Talk, and he talked about the challenges of this offseason. And I got to be honest with you guys. When I first heard him say this, I kind of had to hit the rewind button. I had to hit the back button to hear it again, because Howie makes a very interesting concession here on Pro Football Talks on NBC Sports. Here it is.
We got a really challenging offseason here. We have a lot of players, a lot of good players who contributed to our team that are free agents. We're not going to be able to keep them all. I think we've kind of changed our dynamic a little bit, that we're going to have to play young players because of our salary cap situation and because of how many guys are under long-term contracts. And so it makes it even more a priority that myself, our staff, that we bring the right types of people into the building.
2 very interesting points to what he said, because the first part he brings up, the young players. We need the young guys to step up, because he admits we have a lot of guys under long-term contracts. We are seeing with other NFL teams that you have only so many resources to go around. That's a comment that Howie Roseman made 2 days ago. Now he is saying, because we have only so many resources, we need the young players to step up. It's a very similar comment that he made last offseason, that they are going to need the young guys to step up if they're going to have any success. Well, last season, the young guys did step up. Quinyon Mitchell, Cooper DeJean, Jalen Carter, all had phenomenal years last year. Also, Nolan Smith set the Eagles franchise record for most sacks in an individual postseason. So defensively, the young players all stepped up. But it was also an offense. Cam Jurgens' first year as a starting center in the NFL, and he was better than any of us expected. I think a lot of us anticipated Cam Jurgens was going to have some, bumps in the road, and maybe there would be games where he would look better than others. And, well, frankly, he was consistently good the entire year. So I think that is an interesting takeaway to think ahead to. What does that mean for next season? Well, who are the young players they might have to rely on? Are we just talking about draft picks? Are we talking about young guys filling the roles of veterans? Are the Eagles going to keep players like Slay at corner and Goddard at tight end? So these are all questions that Howie Roseman is having to process right now. And then on top of all of that, you heard him at the end say, it's our job to find guys who are going to fit well and be good guys in our building. This organization has prioritized the quality of the people on their team and the character of the individuals on their team above all else. And I think that is a massive, massive part of this conversation. That is, when I look at the Eagles moving forward, you may look at, say, I would love them to get fill-in-the-blank player. But fill-in-the-blank player may not fit in the building, whether it might not fit Vic Fangio's scheme. It might not fit in with the vibe or the energy of the team. It may not be somebody who is the best teammate or the best locker room guy. And I'm not trying to throw any negative or any dispersion on anybody. But again, hear one more time how Howie Roseman verbalized it. And he's basically telling you this offseason is an offseason of transition because we are going to be leaning on our young guys. And when we bring in new guys, they have to fit a certain caliber of role and person. Again, Howie Roseman, Eagles general manager on NBC Sports Pro Football Talk.
We got a really challenging offseason here. We have a lot of players, a lot of good players who contributed to our team that are free agents. We're not going to be able to keep them all. I think we've kind of changed our dynamic a little bit, that we're going to have to play young players because of our salary cap situation and because of how many guys are under long-term contracts. And so it makes it even more a priority that myself, our staff, that we bring the right types of people into the building.
So if you are replacing Josh Sweat, Milton Williams, Avante Maddox, possibly Kenny Gainwell, maybe Oren Burks, right? If you are bringing in new guys at those positions, whether they're just depth players or whether they are starters, they have to be players that fit the scheme, fit the locker room, fit the organization. And I think that's part of the reason why Howie Roseman told the media the other day that, his message to the fans is this is not going to happen overnight, that this is going to be a long play when it comes to rebuild this roster. And as we know, if you are an Eagles fan, you are familiar with Howie Roseman's work does not finish when the draft is done. Howie does just as many signings and transactions from May through August of any other GM in the league. It's one of his specialties, the fact that he will wait people out, right? Look at guys like C.J. Gardner-Johnson. Look at guys like Ronald Darby, players he acquired in trades in August. Look at what he has done in the past at signing veterans late in the process, like Garrett Blount and Chris Long years ago. You look at what he did this offseason when he did not jump on really anyone outside of Saquon Barkley or Zach Bond at first. And we were kind of sitting there like, all right, Howie, what are you doing, man? Are you going to do anything else? And then he ends up starting adding a little bit more, like C.J. Gardner-Johnson, and a little bit more like Orlin Burks, and a little bit more like Mekhi Becton. And you started to see the picture be formulated, but it didn't happen overnight. And I think we are going to keep an eye on this, understanding that the challenge of this offseason is you can't bring back everyone, and you're going to lean on younger players. So how does that play out for the Eagles? We are certainly going to find out. Over on the text board, 609-403-0973. We are talking some Flyers coming up with Kevin Durso, our Flyers insider from 97.3 ESPN.com. Jeff from Motion City. I don't want to put words in his mouth, but I think that he's disputing my comment about the Flyers a little bit, because he says the Flyers will make it to the playoffs. Too many teams that jump ahead of them. They're 5 points back, and Columbus has a game in hand. They need to sell at the deadline maybe next year. Well, here's the thing, Jeff from Motion City. This year was never about making the playoffs. The playoffs were the icing on the cake. This year was about getting Matvei Michkov to America on the ice to familiarize himself with the speed and the endurance needed for the long 82-game schedule in the NHL. This year was about figuring out who is going to be a part of the future of this team. And the Flyers have already told you with some of their moves by trading away Farabee and Frost and keeping guys like Tyson Forrester, for example, and keeping guys like Sanheim, that they have an idea of who is going to be a part of their future. This year was never about going to the postseason. I'm not worried about them making the playoffs or not. You're right. They are behind Columbus and several other teams. But that wasn't the goal of this season. This goal of this season was to figure out who is going to be a part of this team long term. And that's part of the reason why Scott Lawton's name has been thrown around, because Scott Lawton is a guy in the final year of his contract. If you trade him, you can get something of value for him. And furthermore, I mean, let's be realistic. The goaltending situation is, frankly, confusing for a lot of people. I don't think a lot of people fully understand that the reason why the Flyers goaltending is such a circus, I'll call it, is because the Flyers have a guy starting who is never supposed to be the starter. Remember, that's supposed to be Carter Hart. Fedotov, they never expected him to come over when he did. He's your backup. Kolosov is a guy who is probably a year away, or maybe even 2 years away, from being a legitimate, everyday starting goaltender. And there are other goalies in the system who some people think might be better than the three I just named. So the Flyers are in a year of transition, and that is why we're talking with Kevin Durso, our Flyers insider from 97.3 ESPN.com, coming up next, because there's a lot going on with the Flyers that has to do more than just winning. It's fun to watch them win on the ice, but the trade deadline is going to set the groundwork for the next 3 seasons in Philadelphia. We'll get to that all and more next. Josh Hennig on 97.3 ESPN, live in the Ocean Casino Resort Studios of Atlantic City.
Unsportsmanlike with Evan Cohen, Chris Canty, and Michelle Small.
Joel Embiid's deal is one of the worst contracts, if not the worst contract in all the sports. And the frustrating part about how they're handling the entire situation is that the Sixers are clearly a championship or bust squad, and they're nowhere close to competing for a title. So I don't understand to what end they're managing Joel Embiid's injury. I think they should shut him down.
Wake up weekday mornings with Unsportsmanlike with Evan Cohen, Chris Canty, and Michelle Smallman on 97.3 ESPN.
Good morning, freaks. Who's ready to move? Let's start this thing right.
Tasha's morning dance parties are meeting rave reviews.
Lose your phones and find your groove.
They need an ops manager to help their community dance the morning away.
I need Indeed.
Indeed you do. When you sponsor a job on Indeed, it's easier for talented candidates to find it, which makes it easier for you to hire them. Visit Indeed.com/credit and get $75 towards your first sponsored job. Terms and conditions apply.
We're famous for a buffalo wing. The Piccadilly comes to cooking wings. We're the king. The Piccadilly.
On game day, don't wing it. Take the trip to the Pick. South Jersey's king of the wing. Try their award-winning wings, tails, and ears in mild, spicy, or hot, or signature flavors like garlic parm, hot honey, Jim Beam maple, and more. For eat-in or takeout, get your chicken wing fix on Route 206 at the Piccadilly Inn. Join the flock. Follow them on Facebook for events and game day specials.
Progressive knows finding your new home was a dream come true. You wanted a walk-up with central air and a skylight, and you found it. Now, every Friday night, you get to fall asleep to the sound of your downstairs neighbors' dance parties. Progressive can't save you from your noisy neighbors, but we can save you money when you bundle your home and auto with us. Get a quote at Progressive.com. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company, affiliates, and other insurers not available in all states.
This is the Town Square, New Jersey Info and Weather Network.
Progressive Insurance presents the Sports Flash on 97.3 ESPN. The Knicks and the Sixers, their ninth straight loss Wednesday night as Philadelphia loses at the Garden 110-105. Tyrese Maxey with 30 points, Kelly Oubre Jr. with 27. Philadelphia back home Saturday, taking on Steph Curry and the Golden State Warriors. The Flyers taking on the Penguins tonight in Pittsburgh. Philadelphia has won 3 straight, including a win against Pittsburgh in Philadelphia Tuesday. The 3 straight wins came after Philadelphia dropped 5 in a row. Major League Baseball, Phillies playing today against the Yankees in Clearwater. Wednesday, the Phillies beat Toronto 9-6 in Dunedin. Cody Clemens drove in 2. And the NFL considering changes to the regular season overtime rule, making it similar to the postseason where each team is guaranteed 1 possession. Progressive Insurance, bundle auto and home, renters or condo, and save with Progressive. I'm Tony Desiri, and that's your Sports Flash on 97.3 ESPN.
Hey, it's big. Rob Schmidt recently beat CNN in key ratings, as millions are tuning into Newsmax. Every night, Rob Schmidt is on Newsmax, revealing the truth about Elon Musk's Doge. Tune in tonight at 7 p.m. Eastern and find out why Rob is the hottest person in cable news. Even President Trump is watching, and he says Newsmax is terrific. Reuters Institute reports that Newsmax is now one of the top news brands in America. Find out why. Just check out Newsmax on your cable system. Get Rob Schmidt with Greta Van Susteren, Rob Finnerty, and much more. Download the free Newsmax app on your smartphone or home TV to start watching. It takes just seconds. With Newsmax Plus, you can watch our great shows anytime. Go to NewsmaxPlus.com and start your free trial. That's NewsmaxPlus.com. Make the switch to Newsmax today.
From the Town Square, New Jersey Info and Weather Network, I'm Chief Meteorologist Dan Zarrow. As we dry out and skies clear out tonight, cooler air is set to whoosh into South Jersey. Our streak of warm spring-like weather is unfortunately over. It's going to be chilly tonight, low of 38 degrees. Tomorrow, cooler than it has been. High of 48, lots of sunshine with a brisk wind. Even windier on Saturday, but warmer again. High of 60 with clouds and sun. Cold Sunday, high 37. Get weather 24/7 wherever you are. Download our free mobile app today.
Are you ready for a breakfast game changer? Discover Hot Bagels and more with locations in Margate, Northfield, Summers Point, and Atlantic City. They serve hot, fresh bagels crafted daily in a variety of flavors that will keep you coming back for more. Don't miss their homemade tuna and chicken salads along with delicious soups. Plus, check out their lunch specials and party platters. Perfect for gatherings and holiday meetings. Swing by Hot Bagels and More and experience the bagel game changer today. Visit hotbagelsandmore.com or stop in today.
This is Game Night with Josh Hennig on 97.3 ESPN and the 97.3 ESPN free mobile app.
We'll get back to the text board in just a bit at 609-403-0973. I see messages from guys like Tom and the Villas. Get to you guys and more in just a bit. But it's ironic that the conversation on the Sports Bash with Mike Gill was about the Sixers and should they restart the process. Well, the reality is there is a team in Philadelphia that is going through their own process. While the Flyers might not make the postseason this year, I think it's safe to say that they've been more fun to watch than the 76ers all season long. And to get more into the why of the Flyers moving forward is Kevin Durso, our Flyers insider from 97.3 ESPN.com, as the Flyers are back on the ice tonight against the Penguins. Kevin, welcome back. How you doing today?
Doing well, Josh. How are you?
Doing good. So if I can just kind of hand it off to you for this specific topic, because I was saying before you came on that, this season was never about the playoffs. The season was about beginning the transition from rebuild to contend. because now Mishkov, this is his first year in the NHL. He had to get his legs under him. And you and Haley Taylor Simon talked about in the Flyer Files, which is over on 97.3 YouTube channel on 97.3 ESPN.com. He looks like Mishkov again after that break. So how much of this year, can you explain to the audience, was about making that transition from rebuild to now we're in a position we can start building for more?
Well, it still was a year of evaluation. That hasn't changed from the beginning, and that wouldn't have changed whether Michkov was here or not. When you bring Michkov over, though, to me anyway, that coupled with, and this is something that happened within 24 hours of each other, Michkov was here, introduced to the media, and the very next day, Travis Konechny signed a contract extension. Those two moves, to me, were an indication that you might not have all the answers this offseason, but you're going to have to start finding the answers in the following offseason and the one after that before Michkov's entry-level deal is up and before you're really into the heart of the 8-year extension that you were giving Travis Konechny. That was the two moves to me that indicated, enough of the slow play on this thing. It's going to be go time, and it's going to be go time soon to really make impactful decisions. And for a little while, I think there was a lot of hesitance and there was a lot of wondering whether or not they would actually do anything about that, because you just watch them kind of, I don't want to say go through the motions, but there's an element where the results are very similar. You're a 500 team. You're among the other 500 teams in the league, and you're not doing anything necessarily to change your roster over or get better. You know what most of these guys are by now. And then came the Joel Farabee-Morgan Frost trade, which to me was the first indication of moving on from certain aspects of this, maybe taking a hit in the immediate to start to set yourself up for the bigger picture going forward. And now I start to wonder what's next. What's the next positioning that they're going to do to get the number one center that they don't have, to get maybe another top defenseman, to figure out those key positions and really start to get this thing moving forward. Because you've got more than one skilled winger, but Michkov's the headliner of this group right now because of his skill set, just what he's able to do at his age. It's only going to get better. I think the way, it wasn't necessarily, he was hardly the best player, point production wise and otherwise in Tuesday's game against Pittsburgh, but he makes a play like he does on the goal that Owen Tippett scores. And you sit there and you go, wow, look at his vision. Look at the way he's able to do things. He was easily the human highlight reel in the game against Edmonton. That's it right there. And that's only right now as a rookie at 20 years old. Just wait until he's 23, 24. But that's when you need the rest of the team to be ready to take that step as a contender. And you need to have a lot more figured out. And you're not going to do that, 3-4 years from now and do it in one offseason. You're going to need to do it in several off seasons. So to me, this season was not just about getting him that experience and trying to figure out more of what you have around him, but also trying to set yourself up for that position to go for it a little bit more aggressively. Because if you were still in the same position and you're still trying to figure out, kind of that addition by subtraction element, it's going to be a problem. It was going to be a problem if that's where they were going into the offseason.
So let's dig a little deeper into that, because I think a lot of that is interesting, because you talked about at the beginning the time clock, that the clock starts now kind of deal. So how does that clock starting, for lack of a better term, sooner, right? How does that impact this trade deadline?
Well, it makes you kind of have to make decisions quicker. You don't have the luxury anymore, and to me, they've already made the move that would have sped this up anyway, the Farabee Frost trade. Those are guys that, because of their age, mid-20s, you could still take a longer look at them. You could say maybe one more deal. Farabee still had term left on his deal. You could have, ridden that out for a while and said, let's see if it ever amounts to what we think it could be, to the potential, to his ceiling. You were running out of time for that. You have to still make that addition by subtraction kind of move a little bit and move forward. And when they come away with the amount of draft picks that they have, the amount of cap space they're looking to open up, those two areas to me indicate that there is something that could be brewing. And it's not a trade deadline action at this point. You've already done that. Anything you're going to do from here with the trade deadline is only adding to those elements. It's more cap space. It's more draft picks. But you're not changing anything about that scenario with anything that you do from here. That's just setting you up for more in the offseason. And that's where you're going to really attack this thing and get aggressive. At least that's the way that I see this, because of what they have. I just don't see them, even without doing anything. They could do nothing from here on out and still have the 7 draft picks they have in the first 2 rounds of the upcoming draft. And I don't see them making 7 picks. I just don't see them doing that, knowing they have that capital, knowing they have the ability to maybe package some picks to either move up, to trade for a player, anything that could help move this thing along. And then they got the cap space to go with it. And I also get the sense that, you're not going to find a UFA on the market, in the free agent market this year, that I think you really want to have. It's just not going to fit the age timeline. But there are restricted free agents that you could put offer sheets out for that I think you're going to be very interested in. And I wouldn't be surprised if they're players in that area as well. So in the immediate, I don't think this trade deadline's very impactful for them right away. I think it's still more of the subtraction portion of this, because you're still adding the things that you don't have resolutions to yet, the cap space and the draft picks. And what you do with everything from there, whether you do offer sheets and sign a player, whether you make a trade in the offseason for somebody who's on the younger end, whether you draft the next player who's going to be like Matvei Michkov, who's part of the core of the team moving forward. Whatever you decide to do from there, that's up to you with what you have. But I don't see anything further really impacting the team in the here and now at the deadline.
Kevin Durso, our Flyers insider, 97.3 ESPN.com for all of his Flyers coverage. Now, with that being said, okay, because you said nothing major would happen at the deadline. But, for example, you mentioned the salary cap. I think that is a part of hockey that's maybe lost on some people, because we know how the salary cap is different in each sport. So what is going to be the benefit of, like, for example, if they trade a Scott Lawton, right? And if they maybe, because it doesn't have to be just draft picks, right? They could acquire a contract that's maybe, shall I call it, favorable for the short and long term, right? So there is some machinations, right, the Flyers can do either at the deadline or this offseason.
Sure. And the best example I can give you recently is when you make the Farabee Frost trade, you get Jacob Pelletier, who's a 23-year-old, doesn't make a lot of money, short-term contract. He's a restricted free agent, so you have club control there if you want to retain him. That's certainly a type of player you could look to add as well. But I don't sense that too many teams are going to do that over players that'll be available at the deadline per se. This was a unique type of trade that happened in terms of involving 2 active players on a roster, 2 active players on another roster, balancing out the money of it. And really, that's why the Flyers have always talked about, Danny Briere talked about specifically, the sticking point of that deal, the main reason that deal got done was because of what it did with Joel Farabee's contract, that there was no retention. It's off the books. You brought in 2 players that you get an audition period with that don't have a contract for next season yet. That's what you're setting yourself up for. So you kind of take what Danny Briere kind of does in something like that is takes back a little control. He's not the one who was behind the Joel Farabee contract that still had 3 years left on it. He's not that guy. So you get some control back for the guys that you think are part of your team going forward. The same way that, every time a GM gets hired, you always wait for like the shoe to drop with the coach, right? The GM wants his coach, his guy he can communicate with. Now that didn't happen in this situation. They all kind of stuck together in this. But you start to see how maybe Danny Briere is kind of crafting his own team here. It's some of his draft picks. It's guys that now he didn't have a say in the contracts that they're currently under. Maybe he's looking at something with that, so I don't get the sense that, you're going to get too much of that going forward. You might get, you're more likely in a trade that involves Lawton. You're more likely to get a contract back that resembles Andrei Kuzmenko's more than you are Jacob Pelletier, for example. And the reason being is because Lawton, and I brought this up the other day too, that the Flyers are kind of in a unique position at this trade deadline because they don't really have any pieces anymore that would qualify as just straight rentals. They have Eric Johnson, who's on the last year of his contract. I don't even know if there's really a market for him. You could look for something for him just to do him a solid because he's been a good sport about playing for a team that isn't going to make the playoffs, being in and out of the lineup kind of on an as-needed basis. You may ship him off to a team that has a good chance at winning a Stanley Cup. He's near the end of his career. He might look to go out on top. That's what you might do for him. There's been some rumors floating around about Andrei Kuzmenko and the idea that maybe Kuzmenko becomes a player they want to flip instead. I don't get that impression from what they've said, but maybe they look to do that because he's on an expiring contract. But Lawton still has one more year beyond this season on his contract. And Rasmus Ristolainen, who's been brought up a lot too, has 2 more years remaining after this season. So you have to start to get a little more strategic about those decisions, and they're harder to do when they're in season. I don't think Lawton's is that complicated. He makes $3 million. He's only got 1 more year left. I think any team that is serious about making a playoff run and wants a good depth guy and leader would go for this in a second. And that's why there's been so much interest surrounding him. With Ristolainen, the story is now there's been a little less interest. And I think that the contract has a lot to do with that, at least in the here and now. And maybe that's a thing that teams would be more willing to revisit in the offseason when they're making plans for their full season as well, when they can kind of take a step back, look at the money across the board and say, we can fit a $5 million contract now. We couldn't do that in March. We can do that ahead of the next season. So maybe that's when you revisit something like that as well. But there's certainly a lot that goes into making trades. As I wrote in the article for 97.3ESPN.com this morning, John Tortorella went into a long and detailed explanation about the mindset that goes into the approach to the trade deadline, the conversations he has with Danny Briere, evaluating players. I think all of that was very valuable because it just goes to show you, I know everybody kind of wants to sit there and go, get rid of Ristolainen, and the contract wasn't great the day it was signed and things like that. But you're not going to build an entire team of superstars either. You're not going to just clear cap space and go sign 5 guys that resemble Matvei Michkov or that are among the top on the market. You're not going to do that in today's NHL. You're also not going to draft guys that immediately turn into the next superstars either. It's just not possible right away. It's a long play kind of thing, and you need guys who also fill roles as well. You're going to look to fill that role later on, so maybe you think about keeping that guy around for right now because you never know if he's part of that future for the time being. But you also have to listen, and you have to make sure that if someone's offering you something that you can't refuse, you take it in a seller's market like you might be in, because that could also be your ticket to more cap space, more draft picks, more of what you need to get the team to be better. And that's the conversation you have to weigh is, does this guy help fill a need? Is it something that I can use in the long term versus am I going to get that piece from what I'm acquiring down the road?
So let's say, Kevin, and I'm just putting out a scenario, okay? I'm not reporting anything. I don't have any inside information. But, okay, let's say you trade Lawton and you do what you got to do at the deadline, right? Then you get to the offseason. And let's say there is a player that now, because you're making that transition from retool, reevaluate to let's start trying to make a more legitimate move to the playoff position. What kind of player would that, not naming a player specifically, but what are we looking at players that we want to play alongside Michkov? Are we trying to build up the lines, the other lines around Michkov's line? Are we looking at the defenseman and saying, I know we got Sanheim, I know we got a couple other guys, but we want to beef up the defense in front of the goaltender? Like, what in your mind is what Briere is looking to do here?
Kind of all of the above, honestly. So you're
great. I should be a GM then. Okay, got it.
So, because you are looking at Michkov and trying to figure out combinations that work. You need to find a way to have some success. And one of the things I put out on the X platform during the game against the Oilers was, look at the way that he was playing with Owen Tippett during the time. And they connected again against Pittsburgh as well. But to do it so many times so quickly, I mean, that line combined they were +5 in Saturday's game against Edmonton. So it goes to show you what kind of afternoon they had, that they were just all over the place and pretty much contributed everything offensively that the team had. When you see those two guys connect in the way that they did and continue to make plays the way they did, Owen Tippett got a contract extension during last season. Michkov's obviously here for the long haul. That's 2 key pieces of your future right there that you absolutely focus on. And you start to wonder if that's the combination. That's one, Michkov's one winger, Tippett's the other. Maybe that's already part of the answer. What do you do about the center position, though? Because you don't really have a clear-cut answer there. I don't know that Sean Couturier is the guy that they want there long-term. Might work in spurts, might get, he might have some nights where he has some really good point production, but most of the time he's been more of the depth guy now, and he's fallen back into trying to be as good of a defender as he can be and prevent goals more than he is contributing on the offensive side. So that's what they're looking for also, is you're trying to find who's that next guy I can get. Sometimes the answer to finding the next center that you want to put between those two guys or alongside Michkov is a draft pick. It's going to be the guy you draft with your own first-round pick this year that's going to be on the higher side of the draft, as opposed to the ones that you've acquired from teams that are making the playoffs and trying to build their rosters at trade deadlines and things like that. Maybe your answer is an offer sheet. I'll float a couple of names by you who are on the restricted free agent market that you might want to pay attention to. Gabe Velarde for Winnipeg, Wyatt Johnston for Dallas, Mason McTavish for Anaheim. These are guys that those teams are going to have to decide what they do with them as well. And in some cases, it's an easy decision. If you're Anaheim and you're still building something too, you keep a young center like McTavish, no question about it. And you probably have the money to match any offer sheet that comes your way. But if you're Winnipeg and you've signed Mark Scheifele to a long-term deal and Kyle Connor to a long-term deal and Connor Hellebuck got a long-term deal and you've spent some big money in the last several off seasons, Gabe Velarde's having a career year right now. And he's 25, 26 years old and he's due for a big payday. And if the Flyers come along and say, well, we'll just give that to you, we'll give you the contract you want, we're going to just try to take you right out from under the rug here from what Winnipeg's got going on otherwise, Winnipeg may not be able to match that with the cap space they have. So you might be able to jump on a team and say, you've got a piece that I'm willing to sign. And I don't feel like Velarde qualifies in the category. None of these guys, at least right now, qualify in the category of the elite centers that you would put alongside other number one centers. But maybe that's the starting point. Maybe that's the guy you start this thing with. You give Michkov a better player to play with, and then you start to set the stage for the following offseason, maybe. Everybody knows by now who the big fish in the free agent market in 2026 is going to be. That's Connor McDavid. Maybe you position yourself for something out of this world like that would give you even more generational talent. And you do it with all positions. You do it with the center position. I'm sure they would like to add another defenseman, wingers. You try to do it with every position that you can. Maybe goaltending's the one that you hold off on from a contract standpoint, because usually you want to draft and develop the goalie, not necessarily go out and try to sign the guy for big money, because then expectations change. You saw what happened when the Flyers got Ilya Bryzgalov. You sign the big name.
Really quick, if I jump in, because I think part of the conversation you and I have had, for those who haven't heard of our conversations here on 97.3, is it's also the defense in front of the goaltender. Sure. There have been times that the defense has just been pathetic early in the year. I mean, horrible rotations, not getting back, horrible reverse skating. The back checking was just like lazy at times. So it's like, you have to wonder. It's like, maybe instead of investing all your resources in a goalie, like you said with Bryzgalov back in the day, you say, why don't we beef up the boys in front of the goaltender and maybe see if that makes a difference? Because you look at some of the teams that have won Stanley Cups in recent years. Yeah, you have your teams like Tampa and Florida that have some big name goaltenders, but that's not the only way to get to the cup. You could have a solid to really good goaltender and put some legitimate dudes in front of them.
Yeah, well, and I think about the teams that you're referring to, and I'll throw Colorado in there as another recent cup winner as well.
Yeah.
Teams with legitimate top defensemen that not only defend well, but then also drive some offense a little bit.
Yep.
In Florida's case, they kind of had it better with a top pairing combo, and they had to make a tough decision this offseason about it. Brandon Montour was one part of it, and Gustav Forsling was another part of it, and it's like one of those guys probably has to go. We can't afford to pay both of them. So Montour's the guy who was out, and Forsling got the contract extension, and that's worked out really well for them. Obviously, they've been a good team again this year. When Tampa won back-to-back cups, it's Victor Hedman. When Colorado finally breaks through, it's Cale Makar. And those guys don't just defend well, they put up a lot of points too. Mm-hmm. So it helps bolster your power play. It helps bolster your offense from a rush standpoint, all of the above. And you want to have at least one of those guys. One of the teams that I just, kind of just go crazy over because I love the way they've built their team is the Dallas Stars. Miro Heiskanen on the back end of that is a key part of that. And I think maybe the most important part of it. They've got Jake Ottinger in goal, and that's a great, drafting a guy and seeing him come to fruition the way he has is great. And having some of the guys they have up front is great. But I think that the key piece of that whole thing, and right now he's out with an injury, of course, so that it tests your fortitude when you lose your top defenseman like that. Those are the guys. When the Flyers got Bryzgalov kind of, back in the day, that was still on the tail end of Chris Pronger's playing career, and they had Chemo Timonen. It's not like they had scrubs on defense that, you're trying to throw the goalie to the wolves. They had guys, and Bryzgalov kind of didn't handle the contract that well because of the fact that his performance didn't meet the contract during that first year. There was some, rough moments, obviously sharing the net with Sergei Bobrovsky at that time. The whole Winter Classic thing where he said he was going to get comfortable on the bench because he wasn't starting. The whole the playoff run that year where it didn't matter which team it was. Ironically, the playoff series I'm referring to is a Flyers-Pittsburgh playoff series.
Right.
Where no goalie could stop a beach ball in that series. So, collectively, that all comes into play. But that's where you got to make your decisions, and that's what I think Danny Briere's got to look at is you look at needs, and John Tortorella talked about it a little bit too, where you have to address the needs as well. And right now, center's the most glaring because they really don't have center depth, especially when you move Morgan Frost as part of one of your trades, and it could take a bigger hit if you consider. Scott Lawton's kind of a hybrid center winger, but if you consider him part of the center core, if they move him, that's another one. But defense isn't far behind. They could still use a little help in that department. They've got a good young core, but you need kind of something that puts it to the next level.
Kevin, before I let you go, obviously there still is a game going on tonight. Folks can hear it on 97.3 ESPN. Also on the 97.3 ESPN mobile app, free thanks to First Bank of Seattle. Obviously, the last thing people saw was the Flyers basically kick the Penguins in the face and then not get up off the mat. Will this game tonight, do you think, be any similar? How would it be different? Because the Penguins, if you look at the standings, they actually are a worse team than the Flyers are overall this year. This isn't your Penguins team of like a decade ago that was playing for cups.
Yeah, and one of the interesting things when I look at the Metro standings, and I know the Flyers are far enough behind at this point that they're, playoff talk is not part of this conversation per se, but I look at some of the teams that are surrounding them in the standings, maybe slightly in front of them, maybe behind them like Pittsburgh is, and there's a lot of teams that I see, at least a couple of teams I can mention right off the top of my head that I go, I don't know what your plan is going forward. The Flyers at least look like they have some idea of setting things up to be a little more aggressive in the offseason and still may sell off some pieces. I don't know what some of these other teams are going to do. Pittsburgh's one of them because Pittsburgh really should be in a position right now with the way that they've played, the way that is certainly the way I saw that game play out on Tuesday. You should be thinking about breaking this whole thing up and breaking up the core. It's over. You took your shot when you got Erik Karlsson. That didn't seem like a good fit at the time. It never really panned out. You took your shot. It didn't work. And now it's time to start over. And you think about what they did, like one of the guys that I've always looked at or contracts that Pittsburgh has that I've always criticized was Tristan Jarry's contract. Tristan Jarry is making a lot of money to be in the minor leagues right now while you've got Alex Nedeljkovic starting for the second straight game. And he didn't look very good on Tuesday either. So you've got to factor that in. You really should be deciding. And the bigger question there, obviously there's a lot of key pieces to that core that won Stanley Cups for Pittsburgh. But the guy you got to be asking the question about is Sidney Crosby. Are you willing to do this? And is he willing to do this for that matter? I'd like to believe the competitor that he is, he'd want to play for another Stanley Cup somewhere. Maybe, a lot of people have speculated, would he like to team up in Colorado with Nathan McKinnon? They're both from the same hometown. Would they love to do something like that? You saw a little of their chemistry when they played in Four Nations. So you get the sense that could work if they could find a way to make the contracts work. But Pittsburgh just doesn't seem interested in doing any of that. And as long as they're not interested in doing what it feels like they have to do, they're going nowhere. And the Rangers are another really interesting team because now they've got to make some key decisions. Adam Fox is going to be out for the long term. He's on IR now and just suffered an injury. They've been that team's been dysfunction with a capital D at every other position. It feels like you've got games where they came back from the break and they're losing 5-0 with Igor Shesterkin in goal. And all these players that supposedly were going to be one of the better teams in the Eastern Conference this year. And they're nowhere. They give me, the Rangers give me big Sixers vibes here, kind of, that it's not a lot of fun and they've got some big names, but it's not panning out the way that it was supposed to at all.
Right.
And that's when you start to have to make some decisions about what's going on with the thing. The fact that they even still have Peter Laviolette coaching the team, usually the coach is something that you decide on pretty quickly. They were on a long losing streak. It felt like it was the end of the line. It felt like something was going to give, and nothing's given really so far. They've made one trade, and they've made a trade that kind of was supposed to try to get it back on the rails with JT Miller, and that hasn't worked right away. So I look at the Flyers and I think they're in a much better situation than some of these other teams, just because at least, they might not finish in front of some of these teams in the standings, but at least they seem like they have a sense of direction and other teams don't. And So I'm curious to see if we get a repeat performance. It just feels like with Pittsburgh, it's the beginning of the end. It kind of has been all season. And the Flyers seem like a team that at least right now has a vibe about them that they have an identity to their game because of John Tortorella and the style that they have to play. But now that you also come in and you've played Pittsburgh, now this will be the second time with a refreshed Matvei Michkov, with refreshed players on the other end. A lot of guys, they beat Pittsburgh 3-2 before the break and didn't have half the guys that are back in the lineup now. They brought back, I think, 6 guys from one part, from before the break to after the break. So that's where that impacts it as well, where it's like, they got some reinforcements back. It looked every bit like it when they played them the second time around. Pittsburgh was missing guys that night too. Crosby didn't play. Brian Rust didn't play. Evgeny Malkin didn't play. And yet those guys were back. And I watched a game where Crosby was limited. The other guys didn't make any impact at all. Malkin has games like this that it drives me nuts as a guy who should be one of these skilled players who usually can take over a game sometimes. I've watched more than enough games where he just disappears. So that's infuriating to me sometimes. And it should be to people who watch the Penguins that are watching the beginning of the end of this thing. The one thing that they've got is, did they win with the core? Sure. They can always carry that with them. That Crosby, Malkin, Chris Letang, those guys, they won Stanley Cups. So they've got that for them. But you have to know at some point when it's kind of time to pull the plug on this thing and your last gasp effort isn't going to work anymore. It's time to change over the core. We're getting to that point with the Pittsburgh Penguins.
Really quick, but I got to break, but correct me if I'm wrong. Didn't Hextall sign Tristan Jarry to that contract extension?
I believe so, actually. I'd have to double check that myself, but that brief period of time that Hextall was GM, that may very well have been his contract.
Because I feel like now Hextall has now left 2 organizations worse than he found them as a general manager.
Yeah, well, and in fairness to Hextall, not that I'm trying to defend Hextall in this case, but Kyle Dubas isn't doing himself any favors over there either right now. That one, the Erik Karlsson trade in particular and signing, that was all Dubas. And
yeah, but guess what? Nobody knows who Dubas is. Everyone knew who Hextall was. Everyone knew who Burke was. Burke ahead of him too, over top of him, right?
Yeah.
In Pittsburgh. People knew who those guys were. So now it's like, now you got Dubas and almost like, well, that guy's got more rope because nobody knows and cares who he is.
Well, as the ex-general manager of the Toronto Maple Leafs, he held a high position in a high market, kind of like Brian Burke. So, that doesn't help matters. And he's tied to a lot of things with Hockey Canada as well. So he holds a high place in this thing. And when his team isn't doing too well, eventually Toronto got tired of this too, and it's time to pull the plug on that. So, who knows? I'm curious wherever they decide to go with this thing, but it's already starting to feel like a situation. We've talked about, the Flyers sometimes holding on to guys for maybe too long or not making the moves they should. That feels like where Pittsburgh is right now, and you don't want to end up there.
Pittsburgh feels like the Phillies at the end of their run. Like they hung on to Utley, Rollins, and Howard way too long. And it's like, looking at Pittsburgh and like, I can't believe Letang and Crosby are still there. Like, it's nuts.
Now, of course, all it takes is winning one draft lottery that they look like they have no business winning, and everything's right in the hockey world again, right? Pittsburgh gets their next superstar or something. Who knows? But for now, anyway, enjoy the fact that the Flyers used to be this team. Probably, it used to be this team that was in that much disarray.
Right.
There's teams out there that are way worse than you are right now, and don't seem like they have a clue where they're going. And that might be a benefit for the Flyers.
Yeah, exactly. You are not one of the worst. That means you have better chances of improving overall. He's Kevin Durso, our Flyers insider. Check out all of his coverage at 973ESPN.com, at Kevin_Durso on the Twitter X platform. Flyers, Penguins, 7:30 tonight on 97.3 ESPN. Kevin, great stuff today.
Thanks, Josh. Appreciate it.
Josh Hennig live in the Ocean Casino Resort Studios here on 97.3 ESPN. Coming up on the other side, did want to get to Tom from the Villas' point about the Sixers. 609-403-0973 is the text board. We also take your DMs into the 97.3 ESPN mobile app powered by First Bank of Seattle. And, of course, you can watch the show live on my YouTube channel at Josh Hennig.
It's Flyers Penguins tonight on 97.3 ESPN and the 97.3 ESPN free mobile app. Listen as Tim Saunders and Todd Fedor bring you all the exciting play-by-play action.
Flyers get the extra attack. Rock Hennig. He scores!
Travis Konechny.
It's Flyers 10.
Tonight, coverage begins at 7:30. It's Flyers hockey all season long on South Jersey's radio home for Philadelphia Flyers hockey, 97.3 ESPN.
Save thousands at Matt Blatt Kia. Get out of your old trade today, even if you owe thousands more than it's worth. Go to mattblattkianj.com for more details. That's mattblattkianj.com.
It's gotta be a
Matt Blatt Kia.
Hey, Joy. Oh, you are glowing.
Oh, hey, more like Mira joyed that Miralax helped me go. I was so backed up. Tried mega coffees, prune juice, everything. Then Miralax. And hello, gentle relief without the harsh side effects.
Ooh, how does it work?
It works naturally with the water in your body for constipation relief. Find Miralax today at Walmart.
Use as directed for occasional constipation.
Progressive presents Renter's MVP's Most Valuable Possessions. Today's MVP, Tom Kelly's carbon fiber mountain bike. Because more than riding his carbon fiber mountain bike, Tom loves telling people about his carbon fiber mountain bike. Friends, family, even a local barista knows about his carbon fiber mountain bike. And that's why Tom's carbon fiber mountain bike, if you haven't heard about it, is today's MVP. Keep your most valuable possessions protected by bundling your renters and auto insurance with Progressive. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company affiliates and other insurers not available in all states.
Same game parlays and slot games for days. Double the fun with the Bally Bet app. Let's play. You can bet on football, basketball, baseball, or play blackjack, roulette, even baccarat, y'all. It's double the fun, 2 apps in one. Download it today, but only if you're 21. The Bally Bet Sportsbook and Casino app. You can win real money on your phone. No cap. Must be 21 plus, New Jersey only. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Bally Bet Sportsbook and Casino.
Download it.
Get in the zone, AutoZone.
Welcome to the A to Z savings event at AutoZone.
Yeah, happy to be here. Can I get some rotors?
Would you like brake pads with that?
How much are the brake pads?
Free with the rotors.
Free. Really?
Really, free.
Okay, I also need some oil.
Would you like an oil filter with that?
Yeah, how much is that?
Free with 5 quarts of oil.
Free? Really?
Really, free. It's part of the A to Z savings event.
You might as well call it A to free.
At AutoZone.
Get in the zone, AutoZone.
Restrictions apply.
Taxes was not knowing your full financial picture. Now Taxes is getting and maximizing your refund all in one place. Credit Karma, where a TurboTax expert can do your taxes for you. They'll get you the most money back, guaranteed. Then you can do more with all that money, all in Credit Karma. Now this is taxes. Intuit Credit Karma with TurboTax. Get started today. See guarantee details at turbotax.com/guarantees. Experts only available with TurboTax Live.
When you're hiring, have you ever felt like you're missing out on meeting truly great candidates for your roles? It seems impossible to find them, but they have to be out there somewhere, right? Well, they're not hard to find when you know where to go, and that place is ZipRecruiter. And right now, you can try ZipRecruiter for free at ZipRecruiter.com/free. ZipRecruiter helps 10 million people with their job search every day. And because these people are actively looking for jobs just like yours, it's easy to find the right person right away. In fact, 4 out of 5 employers who post on ZipRecruiter get a quality candidate within the first day. But if you're not using ZipRecruiter, you're missing out. So see what it's like when the impossible is easy. When you go to ZipRecruiter.com/free right now to try ZipRecruiter for free. Once again, that's ZipRecruiter.com/free. ZipRecruiter.com/free. Never miss out on great candidates with ZipRecruiter.
We're famous for our buffalo wings. The Piccadilly comes to cooking wings. We're the king. The Piccadilly.
On game day, don't wing it. Take the trip to the pick. South Jersey's king of the wing. Try their award-winning wings, tails, and ears in mild, spicy, or hot, or signature flavors like garlic parm, hot honey, Jim Beam maple, and more. For eat-in or takeout, get your chicken wing fix on Route 206 at the Piccadilly Inn. Join the flock. Follow them on Facebook for events and game day specials.
Now, more Game Night with Josh Hennig on 97.3 ESPN and on the 97.3 ESPN free mobile app, powered by First Bank of Sea Isle City.
All right, before we get out of here, I wanted to get to Tom for the Villas' text, because I feel like there's an entire show that could be done just based on Tom's text. But Tom chimes in, and he says, Sixers started losing me at the beginning of the season, mostly due to upper management and the way they've been handling and are still handling the Embiid situation. I'm pretty much checked out at this point. It's a shame because football and basketball are 1 and 1A for me. Tom of the Villas, I feel like you fit into a category with a lot of people. And I think the problem is that common sense is not common. Common sense says you should handle the Embiid stuff a certain way. But instead of handling it the right way, the Sixers have gone out of their way to mismanage the message and the situation. And I don't know what it means that people are going to be less interested in the Sixers. We're going to find out in the coming months. Have a great night, everybody.
Hey, South Jersey, this is Billy Schwein. Tune into The Locker Room every Saturday and Sunday from 10 a.m. to noon on 97.3 ESPN. Each weekend in The Locker Room, you will get passionate sports talk from a fan's perspective, along with interviews with some of the biggest names in sports. That's every Saturday and Sunday from 10 a.m. to noon in The Locker Room with me, Billy Schwein, on 97.3 ESPN and the 97.3 ESPN mobile app, because nothing could be finer than talking sports with the Schweiner.